Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it after 40, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Today, we are speaking with Bruce Vilanch. Bruce is a comedy writer, songwriter, actor, and a 6-time Emmy Award winner. Bruce is well known by the public for his years on Hollywood Squares as a celebrity participant. Bruce was also the head writer for the show. He wrote for the Academy Awards, and he was the head writer for the Oscars from 2000 to 2014. He has been a reporter, a columnist, a songwriter, published a collection of his writings. He has written jokes for the likes of Lily Tomlin, Billy Crystal, Rosie O'Donnell, and Robin Williams, not to mention appearing in a variety of TV shows and writing and performing off-Broadway in his self-penned one-man show, Bruce Vilanch, Almost Famous. I can't wait to hear more. Bruce, thank you for joining us.
I'm still almost famous. Here I am still.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your story and getting to where you are?
Well, I was
today?
also in Hairspray. I thought I'd mention that. I did that for 2 years.
Hairspray.
I shaved my beard of 32 years. What was her name? I shaved so I could become the mother in the Turnblad on the road and then on Broadway for a year. My story is much too sad to be told that practically everything leaves me totally cold. Cole Porter, 1930. What's my story? I was adopted at 4 days old in Paterson, New Jersey, by a lovely Jewish couple. My father was an optometrist. My mother was a showgirl, and she did a lot of fundraising. And I would dance and sing and carry on in front of the mirror, and they recognized that I was happy when I was doing that, so they enabled me. I became a child actor. I was never a child star, or we'd be having this conversation in rehab. They don't turn out well, by and large. But I was always acting, and I used to say I was born 40. I looked older. I was heavy. I had big voice. So I was always up against actors who were legitimate and authentic. And I realized, I thought, I'm never going to get.
Legitimate and authentic. Why do you say that? What do you mean by that?
Well, they were the right age, and they were the right age, basically. They looked more like I played Joel Grey's father when I was like 14.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
And he was about 20 years older. It was like that. I looked like a kid dressing up, like when you look at the high school play.
You were truly acting. You were really busting out those acting chops.
It certainly was acting.
Yeah.
But even overacting. But I was also writing. I began writing about my adventures, and I wrote for the school paper. Mm-hmm. And my parents encouraged that. They said, you could go to journalism school. At first, they thought they wanted me to be a trial lawyer, because they said, we went to go see Compulsion, a movie with Orson Welles.
Influence.
And I thought, I'd rather do it on the stage where they applaud. That's more fun. More gratifying. I began writing, and I went to Ohio State, and I had a journalism degree and a theater degree. So I was doing both. I was writing a lot about theater, about show. Mm-hmm. And I left there and took a job at the Chicago Tribune, being a feature writer. That's great. Early on, I met Bette Midler, who was on Broadway in Fiddler on the Roof. Mm-hmm. And she'd gotten a nightclub gig in Chicago, and I knew the guy who was managing her at the time. And he asked me if I would go write about her. And I went to see her, and she knocked me out. She was opening at a club. She was opening for Jonah Jones. Not Jonah Jones. She was opening for Jackie Vernon, who was a deadpan comic. When I was a kid, I was unwanted. Now I'm wanted in 13 states. That kind of. And I thought she was great. And I wrote a story about her. I reviewed her and wrote a column. And she called me and she said, that's a funny column. You're a funny writer. And I said, well, you're funny. You should talk more on stage. And she said, you got any lines? And I began writing for her. And that was 50 years ago.
Wasn't that amazing?
Get the digitalis
and
now.
Such it began.
And it hasn't stopped. We keep going. And then we discovered many years later, not that many years later, I discovered sometime later when my parents were watching her on Johnny Carson, My father said, she looks just like a girl I dated. Who's that? Ruth Schindel. I said, what happened to Ruth? She eloped. She married Bette Midler and they moved to Hawaii. I said, excuse me? And then we found out that we are both from the same town. She was born in Honolulu, but the families are both from the same town.
How
and they all knew each other. It was truly bizarre.
Isn't that? Yeah, you guys were meant to meet at some point.
And then I found my birth mother about a month ago.
Did you really? Wow.
Yeah,
what?
She passed about 6 years ago, but it finally happened after spitting in a cup. A first cousin surfaced.
Wow. What was that like?
It was bizarre because it was like a joke, I mean, I had a friend who was adopted who was very busy on finding his family. And I never really wanted to, because I was not looking for that kind of magic. I had the proper amount of rage at my parents, and I was adjusted that way. And I didn't think that finding my birth parents would do anything for me particularly, because we'd always been told they were teenagers, and it was backseat boogie, and they got into trouble, and they were two Jewish kids, and that was what they wanted, a Jewish baby, which was solid of them. Mm-hmm. And I also was out in Hollywood Squares 6 nights a week. And generally, when you get famous or almost famous, and you have a history like mine, the people who were hiding surface.
Yes.
Generally, they come to you for money.
But no one came.
No one came. So I figured they were gone. It was over. And I spit into the cup as a joke. And we would get, for 6 years, I would get these reports of your 6 cousins with, people, I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And there was no name lurched up out of the thing to say, oh my God, I'm Hillary Clinton's cousin. And then one day, a couple of weeks ago, somebody showed up and they said, she's close enough to you biologically that she's your first cousin to your birth parents.
Wow.
Or one of your birth parents. So we pursued it, and I reached out, and it turns out that our stories matched, and that everything was great. And the only reason I mention it now is that my birth mother's name was Dolores.
Dolores, that was
Dolores
a popular name.
Is the mermaid in Bette Midler's act, Dolores Delago.
Oh, I love that.
And I just think it's like kismet. First, I find out that my father dated her mother in high school, my adopted father. And then I find out that my real mother's named Dolores. So I thought,
I love it.
It's like, is Rod Serling writing this part of my life? I don't know. It's that. So another crazy circumstance.
Well, this is all fresh. This all just happened. So how are you feeling about this?
I was delighted. Well, I'm feeling great because I met them. We did a Zoom.
Oh, cool.
And they're delightful people. They are really funny. They're out here. They're lawyers in the Valley.
Oh, how great.
and then we had, I have 3 siblings, 3 half siblings. Mm-hmm. And it was, one of them was having a birthday. So I went out to the Valley with my visa, and we had a birthday brunch, and I got to see everybody in person.
Oh, that is so cool.
And the nieces and the nephews came. I was an only child, so I never had brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews. I was never an uncle. I was an aunt in drag. So that's all like new and exciting. And the lucky part of it is they're all really interesting people, and nobody seems to be crazy.
Bruce, very cool. Congratulations.
One,
and that's just a whole new avenue that just opened up.
I mean, for them, it answered a question that they'd been carrying around for 70 years about this baby that their mother had 10 years before she married their father and had them. And it was always like, I had a baby a long time ago. I had a secret. I have a secret, and other relatives who were of her generation knew the secret and would quietly share it.
Yes, I know how this goes.
As they became adults. And so finally the mystery has been solved.
Yes.
And of course, the deal breaker was when they sent me a photo of her, and we look identical.
That's awesome.
The same hair and the same chins. And they said she struggled with weight her whole life.
Did you say the same
Tell
chins?
me about it. And she had a great sense of humor. They sent me a picture of her gravestone, which says Dolores Greenberg Friedman, thin at last. So they said, so you didn't fall too far from the tree genetically.
I love that so much.
I know.
That's fantastic. I'm sorry you didn't get to meet her, but I think it's wonderful that you are connected to this new side of family that you can now explore. That's beautiful.
It is. It is. Quite remarkable.
Yeah. Oh, and isn't genetics interesting?
Oh man. There are other stories. People, with friends of mine I have a lot of friends who were adopted just by chance. It's not like I sought out adopted people. As the stigma of adoption went away, because when I was a kid, they kept saying, don't tell people you're adopted. And now, of course, it's like there are TV specials full of famous adopted people. As I've gotten to know more of them, I've gotten to realize that how lucky I am, and that there's so much strangeness out there.
Mm-hmm. So, well, now tell me, so meeting Bette Midler and that relationship, did that open up? Is that how you went to Hollywood? Is that?
It is. I started writing for her, and I was also writing for the Trib, and people were coming through town, and I would do stories on them, and they would say, you're the guy who writes for Bette Midler, and I would start writing for them. Mm-hmm. And so I had a collection of people, Lily Tomlin and George Carlin, Richard Pryor, David Steinberg, and all of the people who started with Bette, because Barry Manilow was her piano player, and her first backup singers were Melissa Manchester, Luther Vandross, and then later on, Jennifer Lewis, Katie Segal. A lot of people became famous who she started with her. She was like the mother.
That's a beautiful thing.
And so among them, she had a dresser whose brother started the Manhattan Transfer, and we put their act together, and they got Bette got them an album deal and a record deal, and Bette got them a gig, and we put together a show, and CBS picked them up for a summer replacement series. They used to have, when there was variety television, there used to be summer variety shows.
I remember this, yes.
I came out here in 1975 to write the Manhattan Transfer TV show. Awesome. And I never looked back.
And you just kept going.
You had your bags packed the day I met you.
Ready to go. You found that sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And now, how did the Hollywood Squares come about?
I've been out here 20 years writing for people, and I've been on a couple of TV shows as a talking head on the Midnight Special, late at night on Fridays on NBC. And they asked me to be the head writer. And in the latest iteration, there was the third version of Squares. There was the one with Peter Marshall that ran 14 years. With Paul Lynde. There was the one with John Davidson, with Joan Rivers in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I wrote for all of them. And then there was this one with Whoopi. And when they got Whoopi, she said, I think Vilanch should host the show, because I've been writing for her for some time. And they thought she was nuts, but they didn't want to piss her off that early. So they tested me. And here, this one's for the win, Louise. And they said, we're looking for a little more mainstream. But they put me in and I was next to Whoopi. I joke, I remember. Whoopi, if that's possible.
You're the only Hollywood Squares that existed in my world. So I didn't see the previous one.
Obviously, you're too young to see it. It's so funny, because even this one, it's been 20 years now. Yeah. And so it's gone from, I watched you on TV to I watched you on TV with my mother. To I watched you on TV with my grandmother, and when the great-grandmothers, I think that's when I sell.
Yeah, I was a latchkey kid. I loved all of the game shows.
Me too, but when I go back to the OG, what's my line? I've got a secret. Yeah. Name that tune. Beat the clock. These were all the early ones. And I watched the funny part is they're all being rebooted now.
Yeah.
And
they were good stuff.
Squares, but there's a thing called Hip Hop Squares.
I've not
on MTV, on MTV2, I think, with rappers, because rappers are so funny.
I had no idea that.
Flavor Flav is the breakout star because Flav is funny. But the rest of them are like dead serious. That's their
thing.
Persona. Yeah. They can't. They're just too serious. They can't allow themselves to be.
Yeah, it does not go with that persona.
But until that one, they may reboot it. The other shows that have been rebooted, like To Tell the Truth and Match Game, have never been successful in reboots. This is the first time.
Why do you think they haven't been successful?
Was always successful. I don't know. Maybe the mood wasn't right for that kind of thing. And I think a lot of it now is reality TV helped, because people are more attuned to watching television, not for scripted material as much as for reality stuff. And streamers, of course, have taken up the slack. People now binge on Netflix and Hulu, and a show will come up and they'll spend the weekend watching all 8 hours of it.
Yep. Yeah.
That's why Netflix is the network of the shiny object. Every Friday they have to drop something new. It's like they're in the movie business, and like every Friday they have to change the bill.
Yes.
But that's taken up the slack. So there's room, and also that kind of programming is so much cheaper than at the end of Big Bang. They were all getting $1 million a week. And so it cost you like $8 million to turn the lights on just to pay the actors. And you were deficit financing. The only way you could ever make any money on that is in syndication of showing the thing over and over again and having no production costs. Compare that with To Tell the Truth, where you have a host like Anthony Anderson or Steve Harvey who gets a big salary, and then guest actors. And it's so much less than one actor on The Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
That you really can make money off of it. And if it is demonstrated that people will watch it, why not?
It's a winning formula.
They'll watch that. They'll watch The Match Game. There are a million
Survivor.
And listen, it started 20 years ago when we did Squares. The number one show on television was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with Regis.
I remember.
And that part of the reason the Squares went on was because there was a thirst for game shows. It was felt that people loved competition.
Yeah.
And our show was more of a comedy show than a game show. And what eventually killed it was they tried to raise the stakes to make it more of a game show. And really, that's not what it was about.
Yeah. It was the comedy.
About if you won a Mercedes.
Yeah.
It was about you won money and you got a lovely going away present and you got to have the interaction with these 9 lunatics who were up there.
And have some good laughs. Yep, exactly. Now, how did you become a writer for the Oscars?
I'd been writing for individual people like Bette on the Oscars. And eventually in 1989, a producer named Alan Carr, who's no longer with us, who I had been working with for years, he managed Anne Margaret, and I worked on her stage act, and a bunch of other clients of his. He asked me to come write the show. He got the job of producing the show because it always goes to a movie producer. And so I came on. And I started writing alone, and there was so much to write that we brought on Hildy Parks, who was a wonderful writer from New York, who was married to Alex Cohn, who produced the Tony Awards and was a big Broadway producer. So we wrote it, and Alan brought in some other outside elements, including the Snow White number. And it became famous for the Snow White number because Disney sued over the use of Snow White.
Oh, I didn't.
And they had no legal standing, but they wanted to pick a fight with the Academy, and it became notorious. And partially it was because 2 weeks after the lawsuit, the Rob Lowe sex tape surfaced. Rob Lowe danced with Snow White. So every time they mentioned Rob Lowe seen recently on the disastrous Snow White number of the Academy Awards, and so it built this legend, the worst show in history, and. Miraculously, I was hired back. The director and I were the only survivors. Alan, was cast into the Alien Corn, and we came back. Partially that's because Billy Crystal came in. The new producer was Gil Cates, and he brought in Billy to host it. And then it was smooth sailing. A lot of the ideas Alan had remained with the show. Little tweaks and things that helped. And a lot of the way the show was actually produced, Alan turned it around, did a lot of different things backstage. Well, that were actually covered. But he had a huge personality and made a lot of enemies doing all this. And it was one of those the karmic station wagon rolled over him.
This happens. Karma's out there, ready for us. Now, I'm curious because we haven't even touched on all of the things that you've done. You've done a lot in your career. What do you feel has been one or two of your greatest successes, and why? Well,
the Oscars and Squares and Bette Midler are certainly them. And then Hairspray, which
Hairspray.
Squares, because when you're on TV every night, you get offered things. I wrote a book. I collected a bunch of essays and put them in a book.
Yes.
Because there was no time to write a book.
Which was nominated for an award.
It was nominated for the Lambda Literary, which is a gay award.
Oh, nice. Yes.
I'm very gay.
Yeah.
and Jewish and gay.
Jewish and gay.
I have minorities. I didn't know I had white privilege. It's because I had so many limitations being Jewish, and obviously the world was much more open than it was to other minorities. But it never occurred to me that I had white privilege until somebody told me I did, and then first I denied it, and then I began to realize, I guess I understand. It's a point of view that you see the world. That's your white privilege, and not that you were able to do certain things.
Or you didn't have challenges.
It was your whole worldview. And once you address that, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the worst thing to have to begin to realize, yes, I do think a certain way.
Yeah.
It's not racist, but you do think, as a friend of mine said to me, it has never occurred to you when you go to leave the house and get into your car that you might be pulled over by a cop and murdered. And if you were Black, that would be a thought that would happen to you every single time you went into the garage. And I said, that's white privilege. That explains it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. In a nutshell, that is what it is.
Exactly. I have a different conversation with my son when he gets in a car than I would if I were a Black woman talking to my Black son. And that is white privilege.
It is a whole different thing. I got lost in my profundity. So I got offered stuff, and one of the things was they asked me to come in and audition for Hairspray, and I did, and I wound up doing it for 2 years. And I'd always wanted to be on Broadway, and to star in a big musical, and be a part of that community, the performing community, for 2 years, a year on the road, then a year on Broadway, was fabulous. I would do it again in a minute, and there have been some false starts with other shows. But
what did you learn from that experience, from doing that?
I learned that I have a certain kind of OCD that responds to doing the same show 8 times a week.
Like, how did that come up for you?
Every day I would go in, I said, we're doing it again. And the audience was always different. And you always got cues from the audience and all that. But you have to do it a certain way, the way you've rehearsed it. But they had left a little window for me to improvise something. And it was really, it became, because it was after a number. And when I started Hairspray, I was heavier than when I finished. And it was so I could catch my breath. They gave me a minute to ad-lib.
Nice.
And so that, other than that moment, the rest of the show was as it was every night. Yeah. But I'd always thought I had some kind of OCD, but it didn't seem to get in my way. But this prove to me that actually it was beneficial, because a lot of people talk about, they won't do long runs. Nathan Lane would say to me, I'd say, how are you doing? He says, I'm trapped in a hit. He had to go do the same thing. He's a consummate actor, but he had to do the same thing every night, and it would be like, it was just like a running gag. There's good news and bad news. Yeah,
it's a hit, but you got to keep doing it.
But you have to have, I think, that thing that allows you to go do it and view it as fresh every night.
Yeah, so that OCD helps you in that.
I think it does. I think I'd be a fool to say it doesn't, because I think it would take too much work to go, oh my God, it's Wednesday and I drank last night. Oh my God, we have to do it in the afternoon. Oh.
Well, see, that's the things that we have. They benefit us in a variety of ways that all we have to do is open our eyes to see how they can do that. OCD.
It could be like Marion Seldes, who was a fabulous character actress, and she was in Death Trap, which ran for 6 years, and she never missed a performance. And she was a famous story about Marion is she came in on a Wednesday, and somebody else in the cast who was like, checking in, looking at her balefully. And she said, isn't it wonderful? We get to do it twice today. And she was totally serious. And this poor kid, can we not,
Well, if you're going to have to do it, that's the best way to look at it. I get to do it. Add it to your bucket list. I want to do this play 20 times. No, I'm sorry, 200 times. Tell me, what about the flip side? What about a really big challenge? What was a big challenge that you've had to deal with in life, and how did you overcome?
A big challenge? I suppose being gay, I was very lucky in that I'm in a world that encourages eccentricity and rewards flamboyance, and you're encouraged to be unusual, and that goes with the talent. On the other hand, you are living in a homophobic society, and even in show business, everybody who's below the line is very macho, especially the women. And everybody who's above the line is allowed to be crazy people. And so the challenge was going to work in that environment. I have to confess it wasn't a huge challenge for me because I was never afraid of being exposed. I'd never had to be in the closet. I always was clear about who I was.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
Nobody ever cast me in the part where I had to kiss the girl.
And to your family, like it was always known and accepted, and you never had to have that moment.
It wasn't spoken of, but it was, I think they were aware of it, but I was a trickster. I kept them guessing. I was a real bisexual until I was about 25, but I think most bisexuals are, and then they finally choose something that really they like. But that's a very unpopular opinion. And it doesn't mean that, I think that if you identify as bisexual, great. And then you should have every right accorded, and you shouldn't be a second-class citizen and any of the above.
Exactly.
But this is my personal feelings.
Your personal feelings, yes. Completely understand, yes.
Yeah. But when I was younger, I was madly in love with girls. My parents were always afraid I was going to elope with Myra Greenberg. Myra Greenberg, who's not related to Dolores Greenberg. Myra Greenberg, who married one of my best friends. We double dated.
Funny.
Married him. And they just had their 50th wedding anniversary. But I just kind of kept them guessing. And but in my 20s, I decided that any woman who I was that invested in, who I wanted to marry and have children, deserved better than a guy who was going to slink off to the Greyhound station, to find an accommodating sailor.
Fair.
And I realized that was what I really liked. And so my authentic self was gay. And so I just said, that's it.
Good for you.
And I've actually had relationships now and again with women, but less after AIDS came in because they were scared.
Yeah.
But that was okay because at that point, my life was like fooling around.
I commend you, though, for especially at a young age, for realizing that and being able to stay true to your authentic self and embody it, because a lot of people struggle with that.
So yes, thank you. But so my parents always knew what was going on, and it came to a head when I was drafted because I was 18, it was Vietnam, and I was drafted. We had a lottery, and I didn't have a high number, but it was enough to get drafted. And you had to go register. That didn't mean they would call you up, but you would register. So I had to go down and register. And there was what was called checking the box. There were a series of boxes, and one of them said, "Are you gay?" And you would check the box, and they would ship you into a psychiatrist's office right there.
Wow!
And the shrink would say, "Are you a practicing homosexual?" I said, "No, I've got it down." And he then asks you a series of lurid, intimate questions about sex practices.
Wow.
Meant to separate the straight guys who were faking it from the real guys.
So the questions were good? Like, do you feel like they were really going to differentiate?
Oh, man, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think Shrink was slightly embarrassed asking them. But it was a way to discern. And I was disqualified at the get-go. And I went back and I said to my parents, I'm checking the box. And they said, that'll be on your record, which was that chilling phrase.
Take that record. Yeah.
On your record. And I said, the odds that I'm ever going to have to work for somebody for whom this will be an issue are A, slight, and B, I wouldn't want to work for them anyway.
Exactly.
So I might as well just be honest about it and live with it. This is who I am. So they said, well, we always thought that. But you really had us going there for a while with Myra.
Your parents sound really cool.
Yeah, they were great. They were great. My father died when I was 30, and my mother was a very controlling person, but she was fabulous. But she was in charge, and it was we had all the usual, contention.
We all have our issues.
Only kid. I had nobody to share her with. When you have siblings, you live in the hope that you can fob this off. Oh, you deal with her.
Yes.
I dealt with her last Passover. You deal with her this time.
True story.
No, it was never that harsh. Yeah. I mean, I would never do that. But
we all have those moments. Look, I'm a mom.
Now
I know my kids have those moments
family.
with me.
I can figure that out.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I'm curious. What would you say is your personal definition of success? And based on that, what do you feel is key to having continued success throughout life?
my personal definition of success is being happy in what you do and not being tied up in knots about what you could have done.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line from Gypsy, shoulda, woulda, coulda. That's show business. Mm-hmm. And so I've always admit, now you don't get to weigh 250 pounds by not caring. You tend to act out on food. So I can't deny that. But I think that that's what success is. And it doesn't mean that you've made a gigantic pile of money, although that cushions whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. So that's not a bad thing. But I have a cousin from my adopted family, so she's always been my cousin, who just passed yesterday. And
sorry.
She was older. She was older than I, but lived for years in Woodstock.
Oh,
with
wow.
her husband, with her husband, who was a sculptor, but he was not a famous sculptor. And they raised 2 kids, and they have a farm. And so it wasn't like they were the money. They were not like people who have a farm in Southampton or the vineyard. They were latter-day hippies.
But they were happy.
They weren't at Woodstock because of Woodstock. Mm-hmm. They were there because they found a good farm for a nice piece of change. And she was happy. It was not the life that her parents envisioned for her, clearly, but
the one she wanted for herself. You live that life, that satisfied, authentic life. Yeah, it really is.
Right. Yeah, that's success.
Yeah.
Living your authentic life and making a go of it.
Yeah. Making a go of it, just making it work because it just feels good. So now what about, have you ever felt stuck in life?
So what? Stuck.
Yeah.
I did. Right before I moved out to Hollywood, I felt, I think right before I moved out to Hollywood, I was writing for the Trib. I'd been there 5 years, and I was tired of chronicling the achievements of others and the malfeasances of others. And I wanted to do something. I didn't want to sit there and become the city room cynic. Mm-hmm. I was surrounded by city room cynics. They were big drinkers. And the younger ones were big because that was just coming in. And I felt like that I didn't know what I was going to do. And then the Manhattan Transfer came along. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, I'll go to LA because I've always wanted to live in Hollywood and I've always wanted to be part of that and see how it works. And fortunately, I had a job and an agent, which are 2 important things to have when you arrive in LA or in New York, which are the 2 places in this country where you go. And for what I wanted to do. And once I was there, I realized, this is it. This is the next step. And so I got out of the stuck. You made that move. Yeah. Identified what it was and made the move. That's great. But it was, the old expression is, luck is opportunity meets preparation. Right. And in that, I was very lucky. Yeah. You have to step through. I was lucky in the booga booga sense, the mystical sense of luck. And I was lucky in that I was prepared and an opportunity happened and I could see. And you took the step to go to that opportunity. A lot of people I didn't run away fear. I know. Stop them. So you didn't let fear stop you. You took that step into the unknown and you went for it. That's right. They hit the brick wall behind you. So behind me is a wall full of shows I've done. And had I known when the pandemic hit that I was going to be in front of this wall for the world, I might have put some different shows. Yeah, I love David Copperfield, and I've worked with him for 40 years. Forget Bruce, the movie they made about me, which is 20 years ago and all that. I would have had festive, probably Hairspray posters in French. But speaking of the pandemic, what got you through? I was, again, lucky because writers continue writing and the revenue stream don't dry up. There was a lot of development. So you can sit at a keyboard and work and Zoom, and as long as you don't stand up and do a Jeffrey Toobin, you're okay. Yeah. The live performance all went away, and a lot of my friends suffered because that was gone. But that was a part of what I did. And I would do a lot of podcasts to exercise that performance muscle like this. Because as Mike Nichols said, interviews are performances masquerading as conversation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was very wise. He also said, I just love quoting him on this, when he was doing the Birdcage. He said, homosexuality used to be the love that dare not speak its name. Now it's the love that won't shut up. That's awesome.
You've worked with a lot of big names throughout your career. So many. I'm curious, is there someone that you learned the most from?
That I've what the most from?
You learned the most from?
Well, I mean, I would be crazy if I didn't say Bette Midler, because we learned together. I mean, we grew together, but I did, and she changed my attitude. We joke about it in the movie 20 years ago. She said I was angry when she met me, and I probably was, because I wasn't doing what I really wanted to do. And I got happy as I started doing the kind of stuff I really wanted to do.
Isn't that true?
So I learned that, but you learn from everybody. And some of it is global stuff, and some of it is just practical. When I wrote the Donnie and Marie show, and one of the guests was Lucille Ball, and she was the guest. In fact, I wrote the last thing she ever did, which was an Oscar with Bob Hope on that first Oscar. But I wrote several things for her on different shows, and but the first one was Donnie and Marie, and she came out. I'd met her as a journalist years before. And she came on the thing, and she was walking around, and she was looking up at the lights. And she went over and she stood in the darkness, and she said to anybody who would hear, "I'm in an alley." And there was lots of clattering, and a light went on over her head. And what I learned was, they'll say you're difficult when you do stuff like that, but that's not being difficult. That's being professional. And she had gotten tired of having to pretend that it was okay that you did not know your job. And so she was just cut to the chase, fix this. She'd grown tired of the niceties. And this came from growing up at MGM and the studio system and RKO and all those places where people did know what they were doing. And she was a beneficiary of it. But I learned that it's not the worst thing. And especially when I learned that when it's riding on you, and ultimately you're the only one who's going to be affected by somebody else's incompetence, you have to call them and fix it.
That's a big lesson.
It's not a bad thing to do to be called difficult.
That's big, right there.
I learned from Lucy.
I like that. It's not a bad thing to be called difficult. That's big.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think has helped you throughout your life as far as your greatest lesson? What has served you the most?
There's a waiter at Joe Allen's. I don't mind telling you, he could serve me more. I wouldn't mind being served by him.
Let me rephrase. What life lesson have you learned?
What life lesson?
Yes, that has served you, that has helped you the most throughout your life.
Wow. Does anybody know the answer to that? I will say one thing, again, in line with the Lucy story. Neil Simon told me, never never finish something and get up and walk away. Always leave something left to write. Never put yourself in the position of facing the blank page. And that tells you how long ago he told me, because today it's a black screen. It was a blank page then. He said, I always leave something undone. So when I come back, I can immediately pick up on the work, and I don't have to sit there and think about what a schmuck I am, because I don't know what to do.
Ooh, I like that. Great advice.
He was the most prolific playwright and the most successful prolific playwright in American history. So those were apt words. So but that's, I guess that's a life lesson. They say leave nothing undone, but then you have to you're starting back at ground zero. You're starting at, let's take it from letter A.
Yeah. Yes.
As the musicians say, top city every time.
Is there anything that you're working on now? Is there anything that you feel is unfinished or that you want to?
I'm working on a musical that involves Dolly Parton's music.
Awesome. And
we're workshopping it, and it'll be unveiled sometime next year. And that's a thing that we've done online. It's pretty wonderful. We did go into New York, workshop for ourselves to put it on its feet, and also so we could tape it and show it to people. But I'm writing a bunch of stuff. The writers are always in development. I got nothing to plug. When the book is done, I'm writing a book about how I wrote the worst television shows in history and lived.
I want to read this book.
I think it's a different way in than just, and then there's this book and then there's that book. I remember Marlene Dietrich got a lot of money for her memoirs. And when she gave her memoirs, the publisher called her up and said, Marlene, there's no sex in this book. But I'm not going to put that in there. I'm not going to say any of that. So she gave him the money back.
Oh,
Never
wow.
been published. It's never been published. And they said,
Wow.
we can't publish a book about one of the world's great sex symbols and not have any sex in it.
Wow.
It's odd because she was famous for telling stories about people.
But then she didn't want to. That's
Oh,
interesting.
she had a great story about having sex with Jack Kennedy and having sex with Jack Kennedy's father. Not in that order, not in reverse.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah, and that's a great, and she told that. She liked to tell that one.
But not in the book.
Not in the book. I don't know. She didn't want to go. I don't know. And I don't know when this was. It may be Jacqueline Onassis may still have been alive. Jacqueline Onassis may have been the editor of the book because that's what she was doing. She was a Viking for years. She was Michael Jackson's editor. She brought him in. She may have been the editor who actually commissioned the book. I don't know.
Who knows? I'm curious. Do you have any habits that you feel have helped you in your own success or in doing your work?
Probably. I tell you, in our family, you weren't allowed to be sick unless you were really. I couldn't get up and say, I don't feel like going to school today. They'd say, get dressed.
Yes.
You know, my parents were both like that. My father was a doctor and he kept hours. And my mother was raised in boarding schools. Mm-hmm. So she was also very on the clock. Mm-hmm. And so I became on the clock. But it stood me in great stead because I work with a lot of people who, you know, if their hair doesn't turn out right, they're in bed for 3 days. You know, and I think that's an old joke from Lily's old act, actually, from Lily as a teenager. It's something like that. But
you show up.
I do know people who it's forever for them to accomplish anything. It's just like forever, and that comes from a different kind of insecurity. Mm-hmm. And it may be that some of them were raised the way I was and are in rebellion, as I am about clothing. I've been in rebellion my whole life because my mother made me dress, and I was a fat kid, and nothing ever fit, and I had collars and ties, and I vowed that once I was out of her castle, I was going to dress whatever. However, fortunately, that's when hippiedom came in, and you could wear anything.
Did you go full hippie?
Those bell-bottom pants, and they could stand up in the corner by themselves.
Yes. I would love to see one of those pictures, Bruce. Hippie Bruce.
Hidden somewhere, lost in a flood.
They're in a box somewhere. I would put money on it. Yeah. No. What about, has there been a movie or a book that you've read or a talk that you listened to that had a really big impact on your life that you think other people should watch or listen to or read?
Wow. There's been a million movies, but I don't know that there's any one thing. I was never drawn to Est or any of that stuff, the instant weekend where you don't go to the bathroom and you learn about what a son of a bitch you are. I would say therapy helped. After my father died, I went into therapy only because a friend of mine suggested that it would help me grieve, that I was carrying around. I was a lot of anger. He died. As I was beginning to become somebody, and I was mad about that, I thought. And so I went into therapy, and I was in therapy for about 5 years, and that really helped. But my therapist said I absorbed really a lot of it. I'm a very compliant patient.
You can hear them, right?
I think because I grew up as a doctor's kid, and the doctor says, do this. And yes, I understand. That's coming from a place of wisdom. And so I assimilated a lot of the stuff in therapy, and
that's good.
Helped a great deal. But I don't think there wasn't a particular book. People ask me, what was the first movie you ever saw? And I said, that's The Greatest Show on Earth, which was a circus.
Yes.
Followed by There's No Business Like Show Business. So do you see a pattern?
Yeah.
And I was very little when I saw those, but I remember them. And I think it informed everything I did after that. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be in the circus and in show business.
I have to agree with you on the therapy. It's very important. And when you're grieving, it makes a huge difference. I know I went into therapy after my mom died as well, and it was needed. It's a big thing to process.
When I was a kid, it was something eccentrics did, something people who were really in trouble did. It wasn't something that normal people did. And my mother used to say, they're going to blame the mother for everything. Yeah. Of course, she was protecting herself, but at the same time, she wasn't entirely right. I kept saying, who has more influence on a mother? The mother is the OG. That phrase then, but the mother is the original gangster. It all starts with the mother.
Yeah, I've been dealing with this in my teenager.
It's not like they've all gotten together. They all sat there in Vienna and said, let's screw up the mother. It's the mother is bad. No, it's
The bottom line is
it must follow.
We all screw up our kids.
As the placenta follows, it must follow.
We're human. We do our best. And there's a woman who told me when I was pregnant with my first son, and she was just like, oh, what if I screw up this kid? And she's, you're totally going to screw up this kid. Like, every parent, there's no parent that doesn't screw up their kid. Just love them, support them.
I mean, I've never had them. I've been a godfather 43 times, but I've never had them. But it seems clear to me that you don't stop being a human being because you're a parent.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that are part of you as a human wind up being part of you as a parent, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
And so you just have to say to yourself, this is going to happen. I'm a nervous queen, and I'm going to transmit some of that, even though it's coming from a place of, I don't want anything bad to happen to the kid. It's the nervousness that's going to transmit itself.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
So you can't help, you have to be mindful. That's all. Yeah. The best you can be is mindful.
Yes, it is. Now, this has been great, Bruce. Thank you so much for your time. Okay. Before we go, I want to ask you my final question.
Final Jeopardy.
What are you sure of in life?
What am I sure? But it's a lyric, isn't it? Rain falls from the sky and butterflies. What am I sure of in life? I'm sure if you are kind, you will receive kindness.
Well, that.
You know, that it'd be wonderful to say, yeah, but what about Hitler? Yes, I understand, but if you don't take it quite so globally, if you bring it down to your interpersonal relationships, that it is something I'm sure of.
Yes,
I've experienced it too many times for it to be an anomaly.
I agree. And when you said that, it gave me little chills on my arms. It's very true. Very true. Thank you. If anyone wants to take a look at your work or learn more about you, we can include
the easiest thing, there's a website, wegotbruce.com.
Perfect.
Which came after. And a fan manages it, and I go there to see what I'm doing. And We Got Bruce, and it's off of the movie Get Bruce.
Good job, fan. Ago. That's high praise.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. He's a great fan. Wow. Yeah.
So, is there anything I didn't ask that you would want to bring up?
My phone number, but you're very thorough. I'd take this ride past 40 with you. Just to
pick your brain, because I really enjoyed this, Bruce. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. It was fun.
I had so much fun talking with Bruce. What I loved about Bruce is that it appears he's been living as his true, authentic self for the majority of his life. And this is truly phenomenal, as the majority of us have stumbled through life figuring out how to find and then stay true to our authentic selves. That authentic self that many of us have buried underneath many, many layers. And Bruce, he went after his passions in school. He got degrees in journalism and theater, leading to a coveted job at the Chicago Tribune. The job was a great experience for Bruce. He learned a lot and met amazing people, including the very fabulous Bette Midler. But eventually, he found himself feeling stuck. He was tired of what he was doing. He felt surrounded by cynics, and he didn't know what he should do about it. He started to grow unhappy. When an opportunity came along to write for the Manhattan Project, Bruce decided to make a change, and he moved himself to LA. Once he was there, he knew he had made the right decision, and he got out of the stuck. I want to take a minute to talk about this. This is a really big deal. Making the decision to take a new job and move was a huge catalyst of change that set Bruce on his upward trajectory, leading him to build a lifelong career out of his greatest passions. What would Bruce's life look like had he not taken that new role? Had he not made that move? So often, fear of the unknown can leave us rooted in the spot. even if we're unhappy. I had this experience the other day that gave me insight as to why. I was at a concert festival. There were 2 stages with bands going back and forth. At one point, my husband and I found a spot very close to center stage on the main stage, and we took root. We decided not to move so that we could have that great spot for the final performer at the very end. It was at least 4 hours until the final performer, but we were going to stay there. And we were having a great time. But slowly, this spot where I had been dancing and having fun, this spot that had felt perfect and ideal, that I had staked out my claim, it started to become tighter and tighter and tighter. Eventually, it started to feel difficult to breathe. By the time the band right before the lead performer came up, I found myself surrounded by tall people on all sides, completely hemmed in. I can't dance without bouncing off someone in each direction, and I love to dance. It can feel painful for me to stand still during good live music, but that's where I found myself, in a tall people box, unable to move, and I hated it. I could not fully enjoy myself. But I was told by others that there was no way I would get back if I were to move. And I had stayed for so long just to watch the final performance in this, what I had believed to be amazing spot. I was told that even if I were to move back, I would still be in the same crush that I was currently in. I tried looking around, but I couldn't see. I couldn't see much of anything. I couldn't see beyond the heads around me. And I was scared. I had put in so much effort to be there. I had sacrificed my bathroom breaks. I had sacrificed my drink refills. And I could tell that my husband wanted to stay. What if I made him move after holding on for so long and it was just as bad? So I stayed. And I stewed. And I silently screamed in my head. And even during that final act that I'd been waiting for, that performer that I was so excited to see, I was not able to fully enjoy. I was not able to release the pressure that had been building from being in a situation that I was unhappy in. I was not listening to myself. Finally, near the end, I could take no more, and I made a break for it. The people around me cried out, "Why are you leaving? It's almost over." But I kept going. And amazingly, I found a wonderful spot not far away with space to breathe and room to dance. And I thoroughly enjoyed and I sucked the marrow of happiness on those last couple of songs. I was so disappointed in myself that I had not made that move earlier. I could not help but reflect on that experience for the rest of the weekend. This micro moment had everything we experience when we are stuck in that macro moment of life. Sometimes in life, that job or that relationship or that situation that you worked so hard for ends up not being right for you. The longer you stay in a situation that is not right, the tighter life starts to feel. The harder it is to breathe freely. The more difficult it becomes to enjoy life's simple pleasures. And yet, so often, even while you are slowly suffocating, you don't make a change. You stay. Because you worked so hard to get there. Or because someone else told you there's nothing better out there. Or because someone else said it's hard out there. Or because it's simply what you know, it's familiar. Or because you are scared that if you make a change, it could turn out to be worse. So you silently scream inside your head, and you forget how to have fun, and you forget how to enjoy, because you are not listening to yourself. If you were listening to yourself, you would realize you are already in the worse. You are already in that place of unhappiness. And this is not the way of life. You are meant to be happy. You are meant to be fulfilled. If you are not feeling this way about your life, then it is time to make a change. Ask yourself the right questions. In what areas of your life are you feeling unfulfilled? Is there anything you can do to change that situation? If there is nothing you can do to change the situation, then ask yourself, what can I change about myself so that I can find peace with the situation? Take the time to stop, evaluate, and listen to yourself. Once you figure out what you want, start making the steps to get you there. After all, how can you find true success, true happiness, true fulfillment if you are not listening to yourself? As Bruce said, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. This is your preparation, finding your own internal knowing. And when the opportunity presents itself, do not let fear stop you, and take the step. Walk through the door. Walking through the door led to an incredibly successful life in Hollywood for Bruce, because throughout it all, he followed his passions. He followed his passion with writing, through writing his essays, his play, writing for the Oscars and Academy Awards, writing for the likes of Lily Tomlin and George Carlin. And he followed his passion for performing with Hollywood Squares and Hairspray, TV shows, and an off-Broadway play. And he continues to follow those passions successfully year after year. Bruce learned early on that when you pursue work that utilizes the best parts of yourself, you end up lit up from within. When you are feeling that good about the work you are doing, you won't give up, and you can't help but give it your all, leading to success. I loved Bruce's beginning story, meeting Bette Midler and building a relationship leading to working together. For so many, that could have been the end of the story. If Bette had been another kind of person, she could have worked with Bruce, not really shared with anyone else where that content was coming from, and that would have been that. Perhaps if she had been that kind of person, Bruce would have remained stuck for a little bit longer at the Tribune. But I was so happy to learn that Bette Midler has a beautiful soul in addition to that incredible talent. Bette Midler took Bruce's hand and she lifted. She introduced him around, sharing his talent and helping him elevate his life. And it sounds like she has continued to do this over and over again throughout her career. It is impossible to comprehend the impactful ripples created when you live your life as someone ready and willing to help lift others. Let us all be inspired by the impact Bette had on Bruce and look into our own lives for ways that we can help others. Where can you make a difference? Who can you help? Be someone who helps others rise. I enjoyed Bruce talking about Broadway and what it's like when your play is a success. As he shared, Nathan Lane would say he was trapped in a hit, which I'm sure many people can relate to. But Marion Soul, she would say, we get to do it twice. Powerful, because your mindset can take the same situation and either make it painful or make it exciting. Marion knew this and she chose to make it exciting. Thus we get to do it twice. And we are all absolutely capable of this. It is a choice. It is a decision. And I have a simple solution that can help shift your mindset when faced with something that you don't want to do. Now, first step is you need to create an active bucket list. If you don't have one, I really don't care your age. Get on making one today. It is a vital piece of life. Create a note in your notes app, title it bucket list, and anytime something strikes your interest, add it to the list. Now, this is my suggestion when dealing with something that you don't want to do. Your second step for this is you use that bucket list. And anytime you are faced with something that you don't want to do, you add it to your bucket list. You make it an opportunity. And this works. For example, I was dreading going on a 3-mile hike in the monsoon wind and rain with 35th graders. So I added it to my bucket list. I made it an adventure. All of a sudden, I get to go on a hike in the monsoon wind and rain. How many people get to do that with 35th graders? Right? Doing this, it shifts your energy from, why, to, all right, let's do this. Monsoon hike, check. Performing the same show twice every day for a year, check. Changing your perspective changes everything. Finally, I absolutely loved Bruce's definition of success. For him, success is being happy in what you do and not being tied in knots about what you could have done. And yes, I love this. It does not matter what your life looks like as long as it is the life that you want to look at. It's your dream. It's your perfect life. And living free of regret, this is another important aspect of that feeling of success. Do you have regrets? I know so many of us do. And if you do have any regrets, particularly if it's something that you can do something about now, if you can remedy that, can you do that thing that you need to do? Can you say that thing? Can you travel to that place that you need to do? Is that possible? If it is, please do it. Do that thing, say that thing, remedy that feeling so that you can move forward in the very best possible way. But if you cannot remedy that regret, then what can you learn from it? What can the experience teach you to help you be a better person or live a better life moving forward? Spend time reflecting. Learn what was needed and then let that regret go, knowing that the experience was there to teach you something important, to help make you the person that you are today. Learn the lesson and then forgive yourself for the regret. You will move forward feeling light and free. And that is my wish for us all, that you are happy and satisfied with the life that you are living while free of all regrets. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Please subscribe and follow us on all streaming services, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Player FM. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Fresh Blood Podcast. I would love your help in spreading these stories and important messages. Please give us a like and share with a friend. Your help is greatly appreciated. I hope you make today a most fulfilling day.